All right, welcome back to Alabama Gristmill. It's been a little bit, but we're getting back in the groove now, so we should have some podcasts coming up more frequently for you. But today we've got a fun one that's kind of timely with the month of February here. Welcome to my co-host, or the main host, I like to say, Donna Causey, the main owner, writer, producer of AlabamaPioneers.com website, and also a series of history books on the state of Alabama and Alabama history, the Alabama Footprint series, which you can find on Amazon.com by searching either Alabama Footprints or Donna R. Causey. And if you find those interesting, you can also move on. You have some fiction novels about the, what is it? What are they about?
The fiction novels, that goes back into colonial America and the beginning of our country. And historical fiction is what it is. That really based on actual true documents and court records, but it's a fictionalized version. So you kind of...
That's what I was pretty amazed about, how dramatic and, I guess, very adventuresome those life was in those times.
Yes.
And in that era. I mean, it wasn't like, it's day to day. It was just constant drama and just a rough life, really, and how they survived. It was really fascinating. And then you tie it in with the narrative that you got. Those are great books.
Yeah, well, it kind of brings a lot about what our ancestors went through. We can understand it a little bit better if we have a kind of a historical fiction version. It's more interesting reading. That's why I did it that way. So, but it is based on actual people and actual events and that took place. So
yes, I mean, I really was. It was definitely something out of a movie. Is the way I kind of felt when I was reading it. Especially the journey over from England to the New World.
One thing I did too is a little bit different. I love historical fiction, but I sometimes read a book and I wonder, did that really happen or did it not? Am I believing the wrong thing? I included an appendix at the end of the book to kind of let you know by chapter what was true and what was not true. So you're not going to go around reading, believing false information. So.
And that made a whole lot more fun too, because you can flip back either while you're reading it or afterwards, and you look back and you go, wow, that really did happen. There's no way that happened, but you find out, yes, it did. And here's the location of the information, references that you found that information. The appendix made it even a great historical document in that sense, because you really understood.
What I did recently too, I put the series is Tapestry of Love. It's 3 books in it, and I combined all 3 books into one book. You can have a nice reading for your spring vacation or summer reading, and enjoy the whole series in one book.
Yeah, that makes it nice. Yeah.
It's a Kindle book too.
Yeah. So you can get them on Kindle or paperback at Amazon.com. And also, you did the same thing with your nonfiction books as well. You kind of bundled all those into one package as well that you can buy, save a little money.
Right. If you want to read them all, you can save a little money that way. So it won't, you basically read 4 of them for the price of 3. A lot of people want to continue the series. We keep adding more and more about the history of Alabama.
Yeah, and these are, stories, some of the stories we go over here on the podcast, and other stories, because you can get a little bit more in depth in the book. But these are, suitable. I think, I remember you mentioned that schools were even looking at some teachers to purchase this book and for the classrooms.
Yeah, I had a 4th grade teacher at the end of last year, was telling me that their 4th grade classes were enjoying them. And so they're quick and easy little stories that are not in our textbooks most of the time. You may have read a few here and there, but they're things that were just left out.
Yeah, definitely not the dry, textbooks that I was familiar with, where it's just like, oh, this happened on so-and-so date, and so-and-so date this happened, blah, blah, blah. These actually are to the point, but fascinating and just interesting little nuggets that you...
Yeah, well, a lot of it, too, I pull from primary documents. I transcribe a lot of information that comes from the actual documents, or such as treaties or stuff like that people can see what really happened for themselves instead of a summary. I try to, that's what's nice about a book. I can put the whole thing in it and everybody can read and see the actual words that the Native Americans said.
The bottom line is, if you enjoy this podcast, you definitely will enjoy the books.
Trying to break history down into something enjoyable. And as you travel around, you can say, hey, this happened here and this happened here and this is where it was. You can see the difference with the way the world is today.
You can find those books out on Amazon.com, like we said, searching for Alabama Footprints. The fiction books are under the Tapestry of Love series and by our co-host author, Donna Causey. So take a look for those and get those because they definitely help us out, keep this going, and keep being able to put more books out and put more podcasts and more website material. So if you keep those, if you purchase those, it definitely helps us out and pays for all the other stuff as well.
Keep this podcast going like we do.
We're really excited about everybody listening with the podcast. We were really surprised at the numbers that we see. That we got a lot of people seems like they're listening and excited about it. So we really thank everyone out there for listening and subscribing and sharing with their friends and family that this is out there. Just trying to be a place you can go and every once in a while hear a neat little story about Alabama and how that applied to the current affairs. That's in some cases.
I'm just trying to give a better image of Alabama. People have one image all over the world online, and there's not more to Alabamians than we get in the news a lot of times. So
that's true.
This is a way to kind of show you where we came from and the pioneers that came and what they sacrificed and what they did and who they were. When you understand the past, you can understand the present day better and the future too. And
in modern days, you hear so much about the politics and the negatives and positive and the harsh language the harsh, everything else going on about the state. And we're all people here. And we all came from, some people that are very strong and they have fought for their rights and things like that. I mean, Alabama's got a great history of being a strong state, and a lot of things have come out of great Alabama. So it's nice to put a highlight on that. And that's one thing I also found that was exciting when doing the podcast and looking at, we have got listeners all over the world. And I think it's because of the reasons you just spoke about is they are very, hearing a side of Alabama that's, definitely a different, if not positive, and, that you don't get out there in the media.
Yeah, that is really the whole purpose of why I'm doing a lot of this is because I think there's a misunderstanding about Alabama and Alabamians, and it's my hope that some of this will change that viewpoint a little bit, and let's see how others identify with Alabama and where they came from and what they went through to become a state and how it all came about. Actually, all over the world, people from France, we were under different flags from Spain to France. They are involved in our history as well and came and went, and some of them went all the way out to California. They just came through. Some settled here forever. When you see what they went through and how their lives were impacted by events that took place, we have to look at history as just history. We learn from it. We understand it ourselves better. And we quit getting so upset about, things were bad, you shouldn't have done this. Leave it in the past and just try to understand the people and where they were coming from. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this site.
And that's the basic of understanding. I think that's something the world's kind of missing out on right now. And not to get too far removed, but there's not enough, understanding, because inherently people are all doing the same thing. They're trying to get by, trying to take care of their family, trying to, be their family and do the right thing. And there's so much, not knowing about the other person that there becomes a line gets drawn against it, and then they don't understand the other person. So we're all in the same thing together, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of our Alabama story is a lot of like Mississippi, Georgia, every state in the Union has their own story. And a lot of it has the same type people. And then, like you say, they're just trying to get by, trying to survive. And this is the way they did it. And sometimes they made mistakes. Sometimes they didn't. There was good people. There were bad people.
There's bad stuff.
Yeah, there's plenty of that. I'm not trying to excuse anything. I'm just trying to say, hey, this is the way. Let's learn from it and go forward.
All right. Well, I guess now that we've got all deep
there. We got too detailed. I guess too much.
I think we'll move on to our story today. And I know everybody at some point, unless you've been kind of living under a rock, you've heard the Broadway the smash hit Hamilton. It's about Alexander Hamilton and his story about coming to America and that whole thing. If you've seen it, it's a wonderful play. We've got an interesting story that ties that amazing Hamilton story into the state of Alabama. And a lot of people probably are not familiar with, there is actually a big connection because one of the big characters in that Hamilton play is Aaron Burr. From there, I guess I can kind of let you talk because you know more of the details.
Aaron Burr was a character in himself. I mean, he was kind of a well-to-do guy. He was a very, very good soldier during the Revolutionary War, but he and George Washington kind of got at odds with each other. It kind of carried on into the duel that he wound up having with Hamilton. And I won't go very deep into that, but that's what and then he wound up killing Hamilton.
So Washington was a good friend with Hamilton, but Aaron Burr and Washington did not get along. Is that correct?
Yes, they didn't get along. It was kind of during the military actions of the Revolutionary War. Washington thought he was kind of not cooperating. And anyway, you can read more about that. I'm not going to go into details of that. They took sides.
Yeah, I think they made a good play about that.
Right. they took sides.
We'll watch the play on that one.
Yeah, you can watch the play and read a little bit. It's very involved. Or you can look it up on Google and understand that a little bit more. We won't go into that right now.
What is this Google of what you speak?
I wonder. Anyway, you can connect with that because it's a lot of information. He became the third vice president in the United States, and he was vice president when Thomas Jefferson was president.
But now, how's that all have to do with Alabama? How do we get there?
After he killed Hamilton in the
Spoiler
duel,
alert.
well, everybody kind of knows that by now.
Spoiler alert.
He got in a big argument with Hamilton that just kind of escalated. And they wound up in a duel, and he wound up killing him. And so after that,
now we don't have to see the play.
Well, no, you see the play to see all what led up to it.
Okay. All right, I won't distract you. Let's go back. We'll get back to it.
Right.
So Aaron Burr killed Hamilton.
After he killed Hamilton, he was kind of, not liked too well around Washington, because Hamilton had his popularity group too. He fled to South Carolina where his daughter lived, but actually no, it was illegal to duel. But he thought he was going to be, in trouble for that. That's why he fled. But he wound up, the charges were dropped against him. So
wasn't Alabama, wasn't there a rule about dueling? It stayed around for a long time, or it still exists?
I'll get into that story. We have some stories about that down the line too, the last duel in Alabama and all that. But we won't get into that right now because that gets too
involved. Give me any little teaser for that?
It's on the website. You can find out. You can.
Well, there you go. AlabamaPioneers.com.
A lot of these stories you'll find on the website a little bit more in depth than I'm giving you here are in the footprints books too.
Okay, so he got in the duel and it was illegal to have a duel at the time.
Yeah, and so he went to South Carolina, fled to where his daughter lived, but he when the charges were dropped, he came back. But then he was not really well liked a lot, and so after his term as finished his term as vice president in Washington and went out west, got involved. It was about that time the Louisiana Purchase was going on, so he leased about 40,000 acres, and he decided he was going to form his own country because nobody liked him in Washington anymore. That's the rumor.
Yep.
And so he was going to overthrow Spain. The rumor is, and it hasn't all been proven, but he got him a kind of an army going, and he was going to go to war with Spain and to overthrow the Spanish power in Mexico, and he was going to form a dynasty there. That's all that was going on. So
I guess, since there's so many new countries being taken over and set up, he figured that was a viable option at the time.
He had his people that liked him,
Everything was all new back then with our country just being formed. Yeah, I can see where that would be a possibility.
And see that they had just brought this land and that, it was not it was under Spanish rule and all, so it was a lot of controversy about what they were going to do with the land. When he started talking about forming his own country, word got back to Thomas Jefferson, and he issued an order for his arrest in 1807 because he said that was treason. So
yeah, it kind of was.
Yeah, it kind of was. If you're going to form your own country, so Burr kind of got nervous at that point. He may have overstepped his bounds. He decided he better get out Dodge, basically with his army.
Yeah.
And he wound up trying to get away from him, so he went to he was headed to Spanish Florida under that control to get out of the United States. But he stopped off in Wakefield, Alabama on his way of escaping, and had just happened to be a cold February night that he stopped off at this house, and where two men...
Well, did he hide out, or
Well, what he was doing, he was just going on there, but two men that were that had been working in the court were playing backgammon. When he came into the tavern where they were playing backgammon, one of them said, hey, after they left, he got to saying, hey, I think that's Aaron Burr, because he recognized him from what he'd seen in pictures and stuff like that. Believe it or not, that it was his boots that kind of gave him away, because they were new.
Okay, well, they had the wanted poster and everything back
then.
They
had
I guess
wanted
that's how
poster.
You got
the. He came in dressed as an old farmer, and they just wanted to know directions to this guy's house Henson's Tavern, because he was friend with somebody and he was trying to get there to get help along the way. Kind of a halfway house, I guess, to get help to go on down to Spanish Florida.
Now, was he by himself this time, or was he?
No, he was with one other person, and they were just riding together, trying to
So he was just kind of, he was on the lam trying to hide out to find a friend of his or something.
Lam, right.
So he goes in this cabin and goes in there to ask directions, and these guys spot like you say, he's identified more or less from his boots than his...
Yeah, with the way he was dressed, because he was too dressed up. The boots were too fancy for the way he was dressed.
He still had his nice boots on.
And I kind of got suspicious of that. And then like you say, the wanted posters and everything, they got a better look. One of them got a pretty good look at him. Well, they decided, hey, we need to do something about this, because they had worked in the court. They were court clerk. They decided, well, we could go to tell Colonel Gaines at Fort Stoddard, which was close by. They went to him and decided they would follow him to where he was going, to that tavern. And they did. And they got the sheriff to go along with him, because the sheriff hadn't seen him. If they suddenly showed up there and kind of like following him, he'd get nervous. So they got the sheriff to go with him. But the sheriff went in and they stayed outside in the code, and they kept waiting and waiting. The sheriff, he tried, he didn't know how to approach it. But finally got the lady of the house, who's Mrs. Henson, and she kind of asked him, she said, am I in the presence of Aaron Burr? And he found him hauled around, but he agreed he was. By then, the other guys had got Captain Gaines, and he came, and they caught him that way. And they wound up escorting him back to Washington, D.C. But they were real nice to him along the way. But they stopped, we talked about Millie's Tavern in another podcast.
The last podcast? I think it was the last podcast.
Yeah, they stopped off at Millie's Tavern on the way. And her husband, at that time, escorted him across the river. When they reached South Carolina, where his daughter lived, Burr kind of thought, well, I guess he was figured he might have his chance to escape there. So he jumped off his horse and declared, I'm Aaron Burr, under military arrest, and claimed the protection of civil authorities. But the soldiers really just got him back on the horse real quick and got him out of town before anything was done. He tried to get away. But they said he just kind of fell apart after that. But they were real nice to him. He even helped Captain Gaines' brother while he was being held in Alabama. He was sick, and he went back there and sat with the guy, tried to help. It's a funny situation, because there were people that were siding with Burr, and I think he kind of was a ladies' man, and because he must have been pretty handsome, and they really liked him. And then there are other sides that really thought he was guilty of treason. But he wound up being tried for treason, but there wasn't enough evidence, and he got acquitted. And he went to...
That's pretty good when he got off treason and killing Hamilton.
Right. But it's
not a bad gig.
But he couldn't... His political future was kind of... done for.
Yeah, I can understand.
So he went. He took off.
Made it hard to run for office.
Yeah, you can't run with all that going on. He had too much against him. So he went to Europe, see if he can start a life there. But he did pretty well there. But eventually came back to America and died from a stroke.
And the cool part about it is why we like to time it around this February here is what was the time he was arrested? What was the date?
February 16th. In 1807.
So a little bit of trivia there for you. In the middle of February, and just a couple days after Valentine's Day, Aaron Burr was arrested in the state of Alabama for treason.
That's in the little small town about Waiteville, Alabama. Right, not a lot you think goes on. Washington County was the first county, and it really was a big format for a lot of things going on at that time politically.
Where's Washington County now? Where is that?
It's in southwest Alabama.
So it's near Montgomery, or is it?
Yeah, it's down below.
Down below Montgomery, even further down below that.
Close to Mississippi. Yeah, see, it's kind of close to Mississippi territory. A lot of the civilization was going on around in that area at that time. So, it's kind of changed over the years. It's not as populated as it was back then. But, I guess it may be about the same. But not compared to the rest of the state. It's not as populated today.
Well, that's a little bit of trivia history there for the state. We're tied into the presidential concerns of the time. And it's a fascinating story, especially that all just happened here and how it happened. But we're going to probably wrap it up now. Just really thank the listeners out there for subscribing to the podcast and checking in with us. And we'll be back soon. And with that, we're going to leave with a little Red Foley and Alabama Jubilee.
See you next time.
Right on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, he let her go home.